Right now in South Korea, there is a bizarre new rumor spreading through the expensive coffee shops and high-end apartment complexes that sounds like something straight out of a bad science fiction movie. Imagine you are at a fancy dinner and someone looks you dead in the eye and tells you that their child is naturally smarter, faster, and just plain better than yours because they were conceived in a glass tube. It sounds insane, right? It is like someone trying to convince you that a frozen dinner is more gourmet than a home-cooked meal just because the packaging looks sleek and it costs 5 times as much. We are seeing a massive wave of mothers who have turned their medical struggles into a badge of elitist pride. They are actually claiming that babies born through in vitro fertilization are a genetically superior breed of superhumans. It is the ultimate case of someone buying a vintage car with a rusted-out engine, giving it a shiny new coat of paint, and then bragging to the neighbors that it can outrun a brand new Italian sports car because the paint was applied by a scientist. Why would anyone believe this? How did we get to a point where a medical intervention for infertility is being rebranded as a premium genetic upgrade? But why would they actually demand this kind of narrative in the first place? Why would anyone want to believe that a laboratory needle is better than millions of years of natural biology? If you look at the raw reality of what is happening, it all comes down to a desperate mental state fueled by the ticking of the biological clock. In this corner of the world, women are waiting longer than ever to have kids. We are talking about the rise of the late-age mother, someone who has spent her 20s and 30s chasing a career or a specific lifestyle, only to find that nature doesn't wait for your promotion. When they finally decide to start a family at 38 or 40, the biological reality hits like a ton of bricks. The eggs aren't as healthy, the risks go through the roof, and suddenly they are forced into the world of expensive clinics and painful procedures. Deep down, there is a massive amount of guilt and fear. They worry about the health of the baby, and they worry about what society will say about their old eggs. So, to cope with that fear, they flip the script. They decide that instead of being behind or struggling, they are actually selecting. They convince themselves that because a doctor looked at a few embryos under a microscope, they have somehow bypassed the messy randomness of nature and handpicked a genius. It is a way to turn a massive financial and physical burden into a high-status investment. So you have to ask yourself, how does this actually work in the minds of these people? How does a medical procedure become a status symbol? It is all about the way the local market is set up. In a place where every single part of your life is commodified and turned into a competition, children are not just people, they are products. They are the ultimate return on investment. If you spend $50,000 on a procedure, you don't want an average kid. You want a pro-version human. These mothers are taking the cold logic of the marketplace and applying it to the womb. They see the doctor as a quality control manager and the petri dish as a high-tech assembly line. By claiming their IVF twins are the smartest in the class, they are trying to justify every cent they spent and every needle they took. It is a way to claim a higher social caste. It is like saying, my child didn't just happen by accident, my child was engineered for success. They are aggressively fighting for their share of the social pie, and if that means inventing a myth about super babies, they will do it without blinking an eye. It is ruthless, it is calculated, and it is a direct result of a society where if you aren't the best, you are nothing. But wait, if everyone knows that these mothers are just trying to feel better about their choices, why does the rest of society just go along with it? Why don't people point out the obvious? To understand that, you have to look at the surrounding culture. We are talking about a place where your address, your car, and even the brand of your stroller are used to rank you in a giant social hierarchy. People are terrified of being left behind. If a group of wealthy, influential moms in a fancy neighborhood starts whispering that selection makes kids smarter, everyone else starts to panic. They don't want their naturally conceived child to be seen as unfiltered or low class. It is like a designer handbag for your DA bay. Even if the actual science says that the selection process is only there to check for major health issues and has absolutely nothing to do with IQ or talent, the marketing says otherwise. And in a world where the surface is everything, the marketing always wins. People would rather believe a comforting lie that says you can buy a genius than face the hard truth that genes are a lottery and no amount of money can guarantee a top-tier test score. So, what actually happens when these families get exactly what they asked for? What is the reality of the super baby when they finally grow up? This is where the hypocrisy really starts to shine through. These mothers will point to their kids' high math scores and say, see, it is the genes, it is the selection. But they completely ignore the fact that the kid has been in private academies since they were 3 years old. They ignore the fact that they spend thousands of dollars every month on tutors, music lessons, and specialized coaching. The intelligence they are seeing isn't coming from a petri dish, it is coming from a bank account. They are credit-claiming science for what money actually bought. It is a total backfire of logic. They want the world to think their kid is a natural-born genius, but they are working 20 hours a day to manufacture that genius through sheer financial force. It is the ultimate irony. They claim to have the best genes, but they act like those genes are so fragile that they need a small army of tutors to keep them from failing. And it gets even more ridiculous when you look at the double standards. These are the same people who will only buy organic, non-processed food. They want everything to be natural and pure when it comes to their vegetables or their skincare. They will spend 1 hour reading the label on a bottle of water to make sure it hasn't been touched by chemicals. But when it comes to the most fundamental biological process of human life, they want the most artificial, processed, and vetted version possible. They want a lab-grown human but an earth-grown carrot. How do you even begin to make sense of that? It is a total contradiction. They are obsessed with purity in things that don't matter, but they are terrified of the purity of nature when it comes to their own offspring. It shows that their love for nature is just another fashion statement. When the stakes are high, they dump the natural label and run straight to the technicians to see if they can get an edge over the neighbors. What does this mean for the future? If this trend keeps going, where are we heading? It feels like we are walking straight into a world where children will be bullied in the playground not for their clothes or their shoes, but for how they were conceived. You can almost hear the conversations in the future. One kid saying to another, "Oh, you were just a natural birth? My parents actually had me vetted by the top clinic in the city. I'm an upgraded model." It sounds like a joke, but in a culture that is already obsessed with plastic surgery and improving every part of the human body, this is the next logical step. We are heading toward a world where the womb is just another factory and the child is just another product to be optimized. Natural birth will be seen as reckless or cheap, like buying a generic brand at the grocery store. It is a total collapse of human empathy. We are losing the idea that a child is a gift and replacing it with the idea that a child is a trophy you win by having enough money to pay for the premium package. Think about the poor kids in this situation for a second. Imagine the pressure of being told your entire life that you were selected to be better. Imagine the weight of those expectations. If you get a bad grade on a test, you aren't just a kid who had a bad day, you are a defective product. You are a failure of the system. These parents are setting their children up for a lifetime of anxiety because they have linked the child's entire value to a genetic fairy tale. They aren't looking at the kid as a person with feelings and dreams. They are looking at them as a walking, talking validation of their own social status. It is a mockery of what it means to be a parent. It is a mockery of science too, because it takes real medical breakthroughs meant to help people in pain and turns them into a tool for snobbery and ego. At the end of the day, this whole super baby myth is just a way to hide the truth. The truth is that getting older makes things harder. The truth is that no amount of money can guarantee a perfect life. But people hate the truth. They would much rather live in the fantasy of the selection era. They want to believe that they are the collectors of a fine vintage car that is somehow faster than a Ferrari. They want the shiny paint and the fancy upholstery, and they will tell any lie necessary to convince the world that the engine underneath is perfect. It is a desperate, funny, and ultimately sad attempt to win a game that doesn't actually have any winners. Because while they are busy bragging about their engineered geniuses, they are missing out on the actual joy of just raising a human being. They are so busy looking for the return on investment that they have forgotten how to just be a family. It is the ultimate capitalist tragedy when you turn everything into a market. Eventually, you even sell out your own children to the highest bidder of social prestige. Is there any way out of this? Probably not, as long as the competition stays this fierce. As long as people are terrified of being average, they will keep looking for a cheat code to make their kids superior. They will keep listening to the whispers in the forums and the marketing in the clinics. They will keep chasing the ghost of the super baby until the whole system collapses under the weight of its own hypocrisy. It is a wild ride to watch from the outside, but it is a terrifying world to live in if you are just a normal person who thinks that maybe, just maybe, a kid should be allowed to be a kid without having to carry the weight of a genetic selection myth on their shoulders. But hey, that is the world we have built. A world where even the spark of life has to be vetted by a committee and approved by a bank account before it is allowed to be top tier. It is funny, it is cruel, and it is exactly what happens when you let the logic of a shopping mall take over the most private parts of human existence. Fuel the truth at Dating in Korea. Support the structure, stay safe in the lounge.